Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 99, Holy is the Lord, which will be the refrain of this psalm. We start off, again, there's no superscription. That's been the case with most of these, what we call enthronement psalms. And we start off, this is the last of them, and then Psalm 100 is going to wrap up. The Lord reigns. That's why we've been calling it an enthronement psalm, especially the next two lines. Let the peoples tremble. He is enthroned above the cherubim. Let the earth shake. Now, when we talk about the cherubim, that's the tune. Sometimes you hear cherubim, you think of these, or you think of cherubs, and you think of these little tiny fat baby angels. That's not the picture here. The cherubim, and the im is plural, were the statues of two angels that were set on top of the Ark of the Covenant. There were also two much larger ones made of olive wood and then overlaid with gold that were on either side of the Ark of the Covenant, and they were so big they basically filled the Holy of Holies. And of course, these were just statues of the real thing. A real cherub was this mighty angel with wings, and it served as sort of an honor guard for the Lord. Not the Lord. The Lord doesn't need a guard, but that's why I called it an honor guard. And notice he's enthroned above the cherubim. The NIV renders it, he sits enthroned between their cherubim. And notice the New American Standard, when they put the word above there, they put it in italics, letting you know they inserted that word. They tried to make it easier to understand. I think that was helpful, but I think between might be more correct. The King James says the same thing. He sitteth between the cherubims. Now, I, I have to laugh when cherubim and then they put an S on the end of it. It's already plural. It would be cherub would be singular, cherubim would be plural. And then the King James wants to make sure you hear the plural, so they also put an S on the end of the word. God bless them. Go from here to verse 2. The Lord is great in Zion. Notice, remember, this is the term for the name of God, Yahweh. He is great in Zion. Zion is the place of the temple. That's Jerusalem. He is exalted above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. And then we come to the refrain. By the way, when we say awesome, I have to pause there and talk about that term, that nurah. That's the nifal of nifal is the passive voice in Hebrew, the passive stem of yara, which is the basic word to fear. Now, remember how it talks about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That same word here, and sometimes we'll say, well, the respect of the Lord, or being in awe of the Lord, like they've rendered it here. And I guess that's okay, but we ought to remember and never forget this is the basic Hebrew word for fear. And so it's for this reason that the King James rendered it thy great and notice that word terrible name. Let them praise your great and terrible, your great and terrible name. And terrible is something that would inspire fear. And I think it's supposed to. I think that captures maybe a little bit more than awesome, because we use the word awesome far too casually here in the English language. It's a great word. And if you treat it in a really awesome manner, then I would agree with it. But we just use that far too casually. And you're supposed to hear the name and recognize this is serious stuff. Treat the name of the Lord seriously. And then we come to the refrain, holy is he. We're going to see that refrain a few times here in this, even though it's not a long psalm, we'll see it a few times, that God is holy. We come to verse 4, the strength of the king loves justice. Now, when you talk about the strength of the king, God is strong. And he puts his strength behind that which he loves. So he loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. And so now, because of that, there's a call, exalt the Lord our God, lift him up, lift him high, because he stands for things like justice and equity and righteousness, and worship at his footstool. And then again, the refrain, holy is he. And so there's my refrain again. So that we had in verses 1 through 3, the Lord's greatness, Here in verses 4 and 5, we have the Lord's justice. The strength of the king loves justice and equity and justice and righteousness. The Lord loves justice. The Lord's justice is seen there. And now we're going to go to verses 6 through 8 and look at the Lord's followers. So we go to verse 6. Moses and Aaron were among his priests. Now you think, wait a minute, I know that Aaron was a priest, but in what way was Moses a priest? Aaron was the one who did the sacrifices. He's the one who went into the Holy of Holies. But Moses, remember, interceded on behalf of the people to God, and that's what a priest does. You see, a prophet comes from God to go to the people and say, thus saith the Lord. Now, Moses did that too. But a priest goes in the opposite direction. A priest goes from the people and represents the people to God, goes before the Lord representing the people. And Aaron did that, of course, as a high priest, but Moses also did that. His ministry went both ways, a very special ministry. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we read of the promise that there would come one who was a prophet like Moses, who went in both directions, who was a prophet as well as a priest. And of course, I'm speaking eventually of Jesus. But here we continue. We've got Moses and Aaron, and also we have Samuel was among those who called on his name. They called upon the Lord. Notice Samuel called upon his name, and then we have that repeated. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them. That's the point, that God hears his beloved people. Not only did he answer, verse 7, he spoke to them in the pillar of cloud. They kept his testimonies, and then next line sort of repeats that idea. The statute, testimonies and statute are the same thing, and the statute that he gave them. Now we come to verse 8. O Lord our God, you answered them. Notice how that, we've already seen that was said before, but we're saying it again. O Lord our God, you answered them. You were a forgiving God to them, and yet an avenger of their evil deeds. God both forgave, but he also avenged. He forgave, but he also punished. And God is a God who does both. He both forgives, but he also punishes. Verse 9, now is a call. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy hill. And as soon as you say his holy hill, you're talking temple language. Remember that the temple was built upon a hill, what we call the hill or mountain of Moriah. That was its name. And so the temple was located there. And what this does, it draws us back to the temple. We've been headed there, whether we realize it or not, throughout all of these, what we call these enthronement psalms, of psalms that picture God as great king ruling over his people. Where does that happen? On earth, it happens in the temple. So worship at his holy hill. And then we have the final refrain again, for holy is the Lord our God. Now, how do we take this psalm and put it into practice today? I think we ought to be able to pray through all the psalms, but sometimes we have to adapt them a bit. After all, in order to worship the Lord, you don't need to go to the temple in Jerusalem. In fact, if you go to Jerusalem, and I've been to Jerusalem, I've been on the Temple Mount, but there is no temple in Jerusalem today. So instead, we have a New Testament application of this, and Hebrews chapter 12 talks about this. But you have come not to that earthly temple, but you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, of which the earthly Jerusalem was just a picture. Not only that, to myriads of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. Passage continues, and to God, the judge of all, notice the judgment theme, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant. You see, you don't go to the earthly temple anymore. You go to the heavenly Jerusalem, to the heavenly temple, and when you go there, you find out you're part of the temple. And indeed, you are the temple. That Jesus has been building a temple, and you're the building blocks. And he is the mediator. He is the high priest. He's the one who gave himself on your behalf and who now intercedes on your behalf to the Father for you. And so you can go to him because he is holy. And you're called now to be holy as well because he has declared you to be holy. And now, as you follow him, as you trust in him as your Lord and Savior, he is engaged in that process of making you what he has declared you to be. He is in the process of making you to be holy. We call that sanctification. And one day you will see him and the process will be completed.